Hey everyone, Panyo here. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of After Dinner Mints. Before we begin, I highly recommend everyone watching to join us in the Art Blocks Discord. For those watching us on the live stream, there will be people in the community chatting in the Art Blocks Mints channel. A link to our Discord can be found in the description of this video. As always, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode of our weekly show. And now I want to introduce our guest for this evening. We have Artblocks founder and generative artist, Snowfro.
Hey everybody, welcome.
We have Artblocks CCO and generative artist, Jeff Davis.
Hello.
And I'm delighted to introduce the founders of processing. We have Casey REAS.
Hello.
And we also have Ben Fry.
Hey.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much, Casey and Ben, for joining us on a special evening as we help celebrate 20 years of processing. I want to go ahead and get started. Before you both met and created processing, can each of you share with us your background as it relates to tech and art?
Want to go first,
Ben?
Well, I didn't learn how to code well until I was in my mid to late 20s. And so for me, I studied visual art, drawing, and graphic design at university. And that kind of led to learning coding a little bit later. And then Ben and I, we'll get to the meeting part, but we both met at MIT. And that's really when my life changed. And I started merging what I knew about visual space and construction and ideas with ideas from computer science and started synthesizing those together. So I had a lot of time working with traditional materials and working with typography before moving into computation and code.
Cool. And how about you, Ben?
Yeah, I had a sort of separate split interest in design and code for a long time. So as a kid learning how to code and 8, 9, 10 years old, learning BASIC and things like that. And then, but on a parallel track, being really interested in graphic design and typography and that sort of thing. And really pursuing them as totally separate, because I didn't really have a good way of mixing the two, or that didn't have a good model for what that would mean to put them together. And wound up studying graphic design in school and minoring in computer science, and then finally making it to the media lab and, sort of having a different way of kind of mixing everything. So.
Cool, awesome. And then how did the two of you both meet then?
A lot of hours at the media lab. So we were in John Maida's group, the aesthetics and computation group, and really just put in a lot of time together. We were maintaining John's Design by Numbers project. So Casey was doing some sort of courseware and support stuff for it. And I'd been building, some of the guts, and the two of us have been teaching with it a lot. And also just being in that same program. So doing our research together and that sort of thing. So that was a sort of separate effort from any of the processing stuff or DBN or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say John Maeda brought us together. I think Ben and I both ended up there to study with John. He was mixing visual space with computer science in a way at that time unlike anybody I knew. And when I saw his work, I knew that's the direction that I wanted to go. And so that's how I ended up there. And I met Ben, as I was applying to the program, and we spent 2 years in a very small room, just working side by side, kind of nonstop. With the rest of our group, there were about 6 of us there.
Oh wow, that's awesome. So processing started in 2001. Can you take us through the start of building this project? Did Ben reach out to Casey? Who reached out to who, and how did you guys get the ball rolling?
We're going to play chicken on who answers this. So
everyone,
we, as we were doing a lot with the Design by Numbers project, we just, that experience of teaching folks who were not familiar with code, taught us a great deal about just what folks were running into and how they were thinking about how they wanted to make things. And there was also a real parallel to that, to the way that we wanted to be able to like quickly sketch things out for our own work. And, so basically the things that like you really don't want to be in the way of what beginners are doing, like just to kind of like get something to show up on the screen, is also like, even if somebody has a lot of experience, like they also don't want to deal with that, because it's just, they know how to do it. They want to just get something up and running. And so in the course of, sort of teaching DBN and kind of working with that, like we started adding all these strange things to it. Like we added, like Python and OpenGL and Scheme, and like, it just kind of was, this very minimal language that we were extending in all these strange ways, and decided, it was really time to do something that really kind of, I don't know, was more, made sense, like wasn't kind of polluting the really simple, really clear idea for what DBN was doing, that it was sort of like a, language with like 8 commands or something like that. And instead have something that was more about general purpose, being able to create stuff visually, and that being an hello world being something that was visual, as opposed to like, writing out to a console or something like that.
Cool.
Yeah, I think we saw what was so extraordinary about design by numbers, and we had both worked on it, as Ben said, in different ways, and we saw an opportunity to build on it, like to directly build on it and to make something, and that was really the origin of it. I don't know how it really started. I know that we kind of sat down one day with some paper, wrote a bunch of stuff out, and it kind of moved from there.
So did you know what you wanted the final product to look like, or is it more of a, you just started putting down some notes and then things kind of evolved over time?
So the thing that we were after in part was just, so the design by numbers, that one of the things that was so nice about it, just, very simple, you put up a couple commands and get something to show up on the screen. And so like, very much in line with what processing does today. And it was just sort of like you type a couple things and hit a run button and you go. And so we wondered if we could, the premise was basically, can we do that, but kind of keep things a lot more performant and be able to make much more sophisticated work with it. So can you have that same like really, simple, very minimal kind of barrier to entry thing, but then actually have it be performant, so behind the scenes it was running Java, which is significantly faster than like, I don't know, really just, most of the other scripting stuff at the time, as far as like, ActionScript, people weren't really coding with ActionScript that same way at that point. Python was not really fast enough to do that. Really sat down, like it really required kind of sitting down and doing sort of full-fledged coding just to get sort of visual stuff to happen. And so we were hoping we could kind of have a bridge that, you could kind of cheat and have stuff, like have things running quickly. And okay, so is this, Casey, are you bringing up a screen?
Oh yeah, Panyo, I know it was messing up my video early, but I wanted to show a couple.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and patch you in on the shared screen. Give us 2 seconds.
So, and while that's coming up, so you'll see that there's a straight line certainly from what we were doing with DBN, and but also it didn't make sense as an extension to DBN, because John had this very kind of a really neat, really singular sort of mission to it, as far as like, can you have just this real minimal number of commands to start getting up and running and withdrawing, and a 100 by 100 coordinate system, and just keep things really stripped down to the basics.
Yeah, so in this image you can see the code there, paper 40, line 30, 20, 80, 85. It's 100 by 100 pixels, grayscale. And that was basically the programming language. It was extraordinary for sitting down with people who were visual people, artists, designers, and within a half hour you can have people making images with it. It was so powerful and enabling, but at the same time you couldn't do things large, you couldn't do things 3D graphics, you couldn't work with, well, you could work with networking and other things, but processing was really meant to take what was amazing about DBN and to push it further. And then like, this is kind of one thing that we were working against. This was our, one of the coding environments at the time, Metroworks Code Warrior. You can be a code warrior. But we really wanted to strip this down and to just have like DBN, this run and stop button to make it much more inviting to people who have never looked at a full coding environment before, but also don't need all of those like hundreds of features that come with it.
Oh, it's amazing. So processing has direct origins at the MIT Media Lab, going all the way to the Visual Language Workshop, which was founded in 1975. Can you talk to us about how that impacted and shaped the creation of processing?
Yeah, the VLW was this amazing group run by Muriel Cooper, and that who had been she was head of design for MIT Press. She did that amazing MIT Press logo. Like, just this really. Actually, we didn't get to meet her, sadly. But she ran this group where it was kind of one of the first really looking at, especially in an academic setting, really looking at what happens when you start doing this merger of, in particular, graphic design and computer science and code and so forth. And, so what that meant for text and, so they were very heavy on text and information and things like that, sort of first experiments looking at, 3D type and so forth, like doing sophisticated color work, just some of the earliest, sort of things there. But, and then John, after she passed away, John was brought in to sort of continue in that vein, but with, kind of a different sort of direction. But the work that they did, there's so much formative stuff that they had put together, like as far as just environments and tools they would build for themselves, just the approach of it, just the idea of, sort of within the Media Lab setting, building sort of demos and, sort of thinking through an idea, building a demo, which is sort of a way of actually expressing it by building it first and then be able to take that and share it with people and, walk them through it, not by talking about it, but by actually building the thing and then having folks be able to poke at it and play with it and run it. And also just the the pedagogical aspect of it, so it was situated in a research lab at MIT. And so it's not that interesting if just a couple people are able to do it at MIT. We want to be able to expand that audience of folks who are working with this stuff as much as possible. So yeah, we owe them a good bit. They were a real inspiration for us. And another, so for me is, coming up through graphic design and being able to see things like, oh, wow, this is a different way of looking at this kind of work and thinking about information in particular.
Yeah, Panyo, I have another slide if it's possible.
Okay.
If it's tedious to be switching back all the time, I'll just stop.
Now you're fine. We'll go ahead and patch you in right now. Give us 1 second.
It's a slide for Ben. But it was also, that's a time where you couldn't do this at home. This is a time where you needed to be in a lab, where you had silicon graphics machines that cost, I don't know, $250,000.
Wow.
By the time I got there, it was like $20,000 SGI machines. It was really prohibitive. And at this moment, like around 1999, all of a sudden with GPUs, you could get a tricked out PC and you could really start doing this at a different scale. It was really a moment of change. So Ben, this is your slide, the sort of the...
Yeah, just that there were a handful of different things, like different frameworks that we had used internally with the group, so ACU was something that our immediate research group used. So we, programming in C++, that screenshot that Casey just showed was probably an ACU app. There were other, things that came before that, both from our group, but also going back to there's this thing called Bad Windows done by this brilliant guy, Bob Savaston. We were kind of building on this tradition of, building tools for ourselves while also having to do our real research. We were never really allowed to work on processing or or ACU for that matter. And so we had to kind of get all our work done and somehow figure out a way to take care of that other stuff.
So in 1999, John Maeda asked you both to teach a series of workshops at RISD. How was that experience for the two of you?
It was amazing. And we also were teaching that with Elise Coe, which I think is good to amend there as well, as the three of us. And I think through that workshop and a couple others around DBN, I think that was really the moment where we saw the potential of teaching coding in this way with artists and designers focused on making images, and also saw the potential for making something, around it and on top of it that could expand, to have a what do you say, a low floor and a much higher ceiling with what we were building. I was trying to pull up the DBN code language, so I'm just going to take a second and try and do that.
Okay, no problem. Well, then maybe, Ben, you can kind of take us from
Sure,
there. How did everything kind of evolve with processing?
Yeah, I mean, I think with with things like that, it was just this idea of it kind of forced the issue, right? That like for Casey and I, we personally wanted to be able to like really quickly be able to do stuff like, I don't know, write some code and have it generate vector graphics that we can take back into Illustrator or something else and mess with further, or be able to do that, but also build these interactive things, and also the 3D stuff. We wanted that to kind of run in a browser and be more accessible and not just live in these SGI workstations. And like, so like the more that we spent time with students who are like also asking, so you have a bunch of RISD students who are, coming out of this amazing, graphic design program. They're like, what do you mean we can only do 100 levels of gray and 100 by 100 pixel grid? And like, for as much as it's like, yeah, this is, working with constraints and kind of thinking through that, you also want to like, I want to see what they're going to do. And they have, that we open up more of those constraints and like the kinds of things that they have in their heads. And so I think that really served as those kinds of workshops really served as an inspiration for it not just being something that was like bothering Casey and I, that we wanted this kind of stuff, or it wasn't, oh, we kind of want this for our friends at the lab who we keep having to explain things like how to get pixels out of an image or, something like that. But really kind of forcing the issue of like, yeah, we need some better tools for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys, so when you're kind of like at this like early point and like kind of moving from design by numbers and it being purposely sort of constrained, and then thinking like, oh, let's do something that has like more space in it, I guess, to explore. Did you guys at that point, like, were you realizing like the amount of space that could be explored sort of in this, like the full idea of like really generative, like putting a lot of logic and just letting something kind of become its own thing, versus, it sounded like when you were first starting, like you were trying to make it do specific things, versus then like this idea of making something that's more like emergent, or that there's this really huge space that you're starting to open up. Like, are you starting to like see that at that point? Is that part of what you're realizing as you're building it?
Well, it's funny because it was more like, for that kind of work, it was more that Casey and I were both thinking about those ideas. Like, it wasn't necessarily that we developed processing specifically around that stuff, yet our work, both dealt with different aspects of that. So for me, working in information and this whole idea of like, can you do information design that's more organic and have kind of different pieces of information kind of interacting with each other, and like sort of code-wise living by rules and sort of seeing emergent behavior for, an actual output from something, as opposed to like this really prescriptive way that we think about data visualization at this point. And Casey also doing generative work. So it's kind of, it's funny because it wasn't necessarily, I don't know, I think it was sort of an assumption built into it because there's such a specific set of things that Casey and I were thinking about and working on within our own work at the time. And then that just, was going to be built in there that way.
And then also, we were very much a part of this community together, and other people had come from architecture backgrounds and math backgrounds. And I think everything at that point was like, it was full screen, it was 3D more or less. I mean, people were doing 2D stuff, of course, too. It was highly interactive, using external hardware interfaces. And like, that's where our heads were. And Ben and I, of course, had our own specific interests in, I think when processing got out into the world, other people wanted to do other things. They wanted to do like really specific sound stuff, more computer vision stuff, import, export different data formats that Ben and I had been working with. And that's when we started building out the library system to kind of like, for us to get out of the way, to allow other people to create new parts of processing, to fully own those projects, to to write them, to share them, to document them. I think at that point, the project just expanded tremendously in its potential. And that's because it was completely free, libre, open source software, and there were a lot of people like engaging with the software in community and wanting to extend it and to share what they were doing and passionate about with everybody else.
Cool. Did you have anything else, Jeff, that you wanted to throw in there?
No, I was just curious
Okay.
because it's like I just was curious if
Yeah.
there was the kind of like, you know, as you're sort of building this tool, like, is there sort of this aha moment where you're like, oh my gosh, we just opened up a door to something new that hasn't yet, you know, been explored? Because to me, like, it seems like there were people thinking about these things but didn't have sort of the technology to actually like pursue them, because to manually iterate through the things that processing or being able to code, if you could code it all on your own, but like people that were thinking this way that didn't necessarily have, you know, development skills to like actually sit down and write a computer program to do all of it, that you're kind of creating this new space for people to explore systems and iterative work and things like that. So I was just wondering if there was some point when you guys were building, like, oh, we just opened up a new door to something brand new here.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if there's a transition point of, yeah, we, you know, because it also that's kind of an evaluation that we can't really do on the, you know, like from inside of it, you know, that I think there's a lot of that stuff that's sort of in the water, and it's certainly the, or in the water for us at the time, but the very explicitly, you know, kind of going back to that idea of, you know, so actually coming from John as well, like, that it's not very interesting if it's just a handful of people, like the 6 people each year who are in this group at the Media Lab, to be able to do this work or to be able to work in this kind of space. And it's way more interesting if you kind of bring in all these people from different kinds of domains, and like, whether it's, you know, design or architecture or, you know, on and on and on, and like hopefully folks completely outside of those fields. And so that, you know, which I was kind of referencing as the pedagogical side of it, but really it's kind of like somewhere between, you know, the teaching, the access to it, yeah, it's just a lot more interesting if you expand that whole space, right? And so I think that was a big part of what we were after. Also that the folks who were starting to do a little bit more coding, there was a good bit of that being its own sort of kind of gatekeeping around that too. And so we didn't want it to be sort of like, oh, here's a couple people who can do like really fancy generative whatever kind of things with code, when a lot of that stuff should be, you know, how do we make that really easy for everybody? And then at that point we can start getting better work out of it, right? You know, so if like everybody knows how to do a Voronoi diagram or, you know, something like that, then it's a lot more compelling, because then people are kind of get past that algorithmic thing and start getting into like a more interesting conceptual space. And so wanting to make that algorithmic and code aspect of it kind of disappear a little bit, so that you can actually focus a bit more on, I don't know, either process-wise what you're building, or just the artifacts, you know, created themselves, rather than just technique or whatever. So.
I have a couple of things to tack on if I can. Panyo, can we look at the slide again?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is hard to see. This is one thing that we did. On the left is the equivalent processing code for what's on the right, which is Java code. And that's a standard Java example. I think it was from one of the books, one of the O'Reilly books, like the Nutshell books. And so like, what happens when you assume A, that you're drawing, and B, you're going to have motion and interactivity? You can cut out all of that code, which you're going to be reusing over and over again, which somebody with a background in computer science, it's no problem. But for somebody who just wants to draw a line or wants to make a circle move across the screen, you don't need all that code to be repetitive. And so processing allowed you to just cut straight to the core of getting to work with motion and getting to work with drawing. So another thing is that, of course, at that time, there were like different environments. This is something that we were reacting to. This is the director environment. And so this is an environment that a lot of designers were using to make things with at that time, sort of from the CD-ROM multimedia age. And the idea here is sort of there's a timeline, but you can put code on the different pieces. And it just didn't allow you to really access what you could do with software. It was easy to use, but it was like a limiter on the different kinds of things that you could do. And on the other hand, there was like code like this. This is OpenGL code from the time. Like, look at this code and look what this code makes. Like, this is not how I wanted to be like in my studio making things at all. And so that's really where what I think what processing does quite nicely that's a little bit different is that this, for example, is a processing code that draws a circle and a line to the screen. So if I hit run here, I'll see kind of what I get. So okay, programming languages have been around for decades and decades. But until recently, they really prioritized working with language and working with numbers. And for me, what processing is really about is let's learn how to think with code. Let's learn how to take these really exciting ideas from computer science and from coding and apply them in the visual domain. But let's start with images. And I think that the curriculum that we built around processing, it took years to figure out how to teach artists and designers how to code by the whole community with a lot of trial and error, is one of the biggest things that we brought to it. And with that, from the early days, like you think from the first few conversations, was this idea of making a sketchbook for coding and this idea of sketching with code. So those are some thoughts about what I think we've brought to the table, building on top of like all the work that came before.
I love it. Do you have some of the early projects that you could share with us as far as, what, maybe the code looked like and how, with the output created?
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe I can show a couple examples of what I like to call sketching with code.
Yeah.
And this is some really early code that I wrote probably around 2002, 2003. So what oftentimes happens with sketching with code is that you'll just sort of sit down with processing and you'll just maybe have a couple sketches in your sketchbook and you'll just start making things. And so this is what I'm going to show is over the result of maybe like an hour or two of working. So this started with someone else's code. This was William Nguyen's code. And basically it's just some circles that know where their space is. And when you drag one onto another, they move away. So it's doing a little bit of work with like angles and math, but this is the basic operation. So like that's the starting point. The next part for this piece of code, in terms of like following a line, like just kind of following a thought forward, was doing this. Like now it's no longer an interactive program. I don't know where that's loading. Very interesting. Here it is. It's no longer an interactive program, but now it's sort of a kinetic motion machine. And so here you see the circles. These yellow dots represent the direction the circle's moving. They just kind of move on a straight line. And then when they overlap with another circle, remember they know about each other, they rotate. And so it's this sort of kinetic software piece. And so that was the next step in that. The third step for me was to begin to remove some visual information and to add some additional information. And so what you have here is the perimeters of the circles are no longer being drawn, but of course they're still there in the system. But now those yellow dots kind of on the exterior there, but now when the circles are overlapping, you can see that I'm drawing a connection between those 2 points. So that was the next step. And then this was really the last step here, as a result of like the sketching and following this idea. So now everything's been removed except for the lines that are drawn between those circles.
Oh, wow.
And there's 3 different gray values depending on how long the lines are. And I can sort of restart this. I can put them on a line and then have it unfold. I can put them at the top and bottom and have them unfold, or start them at like random points, or have them start along a perimeter circle. But then I can also look at it in this other mode too, where now instead of looking at the connections, I'm looking at the individual pieces again. And you can see them here kind of like moving through, and then they begin to intersect and begin to rotate. And so for me, the idea of sketching with code was really the main reason of processing. And the idea is kind of like to sit down, try something out, maybe it doesn't work, and then you try something else out, and you sort of build these trees of thought that you can like move up and down and explore in a really quick, immediate, direct way that languages that we were using at the time, like C++ and Java, just were kind of inhibited doing. But on top of that, this idea that I think a lot of the art blocks artists know is maybe you spend a couple hours writing the engine, and then maybe you spend 5 months after that, like tuning it and tweaking it and making small little changes. And processing with this immediate visual feedback, for me, sort of allowed my work to grow and develop in that way.
That's very cool. So what would you guys say are like some of the biggest hurdles or challenges that you faced, throughout the creation of processing? Was there something where you hit like a roadblock and then basically, you were kind of stuck for a while and you had to kind of just, sit on and think, or can you kind of go dive into that a little bit?
It's a deep one.
We've burned out multiple times in the last 20 years. And just had to take a long break. It's really been hard. But seeing the things people make with it has been, extraordinary and motivating and wonderful.
That's great. That's always promising. Obviously you put in your heart and soul into, creating this. So it's influenced so many people. It created so many amazing projects. And it's obviously very much appreciated. So during the very beginning of the project, the name was always changing. It looks like, you had processing, but then you used the numbers 0 and 3, and then you used the numbers 3 and 5 in processing, and then you used 0 and 1. How did you come up with the final name of just using all letters and just creating processing?
Who knows? Who can remember that long ago?
We thought it would be a great idea to have the name be generative, and so we'll just have it keep sort of iterating and always be different whenever it shows up. And we played with that. You can see old versions of the site. If you go to like archive.org, you'll see like we didn't use the same version of processing the spelling with the numbers and the letters and so forth the same in anywhere, and so it just kind of kept changing. The software itself could change, the title in the menu bar, things like that. We're like, oh, this would be kind of fun, and just kind of eventually we moved away from it because it was a little too on the nose. It's like, it's code, do you get it? And so we dialed it back a bit. We used processing.net with the 2 5s for the S's for the domain for a long time. We managed to save up some budget to eventually buy processing.org from a scalper at the time for I think $3,000 or something, which was like an outrageous sum of money at the time. And certainly for us and what our budgets were like, being like zero. But it was, it was a good move, I think. So.
Absolutely.
I regret it to this day.
Well, can you guys talk to us about the Processing Foundation?
100%. So in 2012, we realized that we needed to do something because we were just really struggling. And we'd never worked with money before. We had been completely volunteer from 2001 to 2012. We gotten a couple small grants that allowed some time to work or pay people for a very small amount of time to work. And so we started the foundation to hold the copyright for the software, and then also to allow us to start receiving donations from the community. It was really necessary. I think we'd maxed out what we could do with volunteer time and all volunteer hours. And since 2012, the foundation it's really expanded our mission in a beautiful way. Ben and I were always, just struggling to get the website done, struggling to get the software out. We didn't have any time for community. We didn't have any time for advocacy. And the foundation and the grant writing that the team that we're working with now has allowed us to begin to do that work. And so now we have our Processing Community Day. We have Processing Community Day Global, which we've actually just been celebrating this weekend. This is kind of the final event. But we've been able to bring on Johanna and Dorothy and Tony and Saber And we're now able to have some income for paying for the development leads for P5.js and for the online web editor for P5. And it's really changed everything for us in an extraordinary way. Also, I should say Dan Schiffman is a third project lead of processing now. Eventually, he came on and joined us with that too. What else to say about the foundation, Ben?
Well, on Dan Schiffman, that was a really great influx of energy for us, as far as just kind of giving us a nice boost. And it's always a great time to hang out with Dan. And yeah, it's just, really wonderful to work with. But I think the other thing for the foundation was that part of the reason it took so long was processing has always been something that is done like in our spare time, like whatever that means. And that it was never like, it has never been our job. We've never been like paid to do it full time. We've never, like even going back to as, students and doing our graduate work, it was not our graduate work, like we had other stuff we were studying for dissertations and master's theses and so forth. And so basically it was kind of something that we worked on, or we've always worked on because we feel it's important and continue to feel so. But it's also given the limited time afforded by that. So it's like, hey, I've got, an hour or 2 or 4 to work on this stuff. Do I go out and work on grants? Do I, see about starting a foundation? Do I figure out how to set up a 501c3? Do I, all of the other logistical things that might go with that? Or do I like deal with these immediate, 10 different issues that we need to take care of and add another feature that I want, I've been using in my own work and I want to get out into the rest of the community. And so, for that first 10, 12 years, we quite literally always chose the latter. And, and it was really required forcing ourselves to like, okay, we need to just do this because this is not a sustainable sort of thing. So.
Very cool. So I've received a couple questions from artists that are on our platform, and so I'll just kind of go over them right now. What is your collaboration workflow like between the two of you?
We've never actually been in the same place while working on processing.
Oh, wow.
Which is kind of funny. So Casey was finishing the summer that we started working, so basically that 20 years ago, Casey was finishing up his master's as we were kind of making the first version. So like that summer so I guess we, did the sketch on paper and things like that. And we were talking about it. And the very first release happening, on the 9th, that was while I was, overseas. Casey is back in Boston, like, trying to get his thesis done by the end of August, if I'm not mistaken. Completely, so we were both like extremely busy with our own sort of thing. And but it's been interesting because it was really, for as long as we've collaborated, it's always been this remote sort of thing, but it was established by our relationship from having worked together for, the couple years prior, and just sort of knowing that the other is always working late and later, and, just our general approach for, how we would attack stuff. And so, but it's funny that's, kind of held up that way.
Yeah, and we would really get together once or twice a year, sometimes more if we were lucky, and really hash out the hard stuff, the really difficult stuff. And I think AOL Instant Messenger was how processing got developed for a few years.
That's amazing.
We're just kind of like always online, always on IM, late nights on the kitchen table, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, and by get together, it's us being invited to speak at the same conference, so like we didn't like have a budget to like go and hang out and work together. It was like, oh, cool, let's say yes to this conference because we've both been invited to do this thing, and we'll have, a weekend or week or a couple days or whatever to like crank away on some stuff. So.
And oftentimes the early releases would happen at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. the day before a workshop that would start at like 8 a.m. It was kind of like developed by necessity by those kinds of deadlines.
That's amazing. What about your favorite college courses? Were there specific courses where you said, like, this was the biggest influence in, moving you forward to creating processing?
It's interesting.
I was a real design geek in college and deeply into curriculum. And so things like, so I like Joseph Albers writing about color, or Itten writing about form, or, you know, Armin Hoffman's graphic design manual, Wolfgang Weingart's work in design. That way of teaching design, sort of Bauhaus legacy kind of way of teaching design, was a large part of my way into processing. I had this idea that we could teach all the design fundamentals through code. We could teach color, we could teach form, we could teach animation, we could teach interactivity, completely within a software environment rather than in a gouache, which is and like Plaka, which is this thick black paint. That was my, hand experience in learning those design tools. So yeah, the whole legacy of um, design education for me was one of the major motivators. When I went to MIT expecting to study information design, and quickly kind of realized that wasn't the place for me. And so I started taking robotics classes through the AI lab.
Oh, wow.
And a class that I took from Rodney Brooks, where we talked about like emergence and Bratenberg vehicles and kind of the new AI, more like artificial life, not like conceptual AI. That had the biggest influence on the artwork that I made at that time and continue to make today.
Yeah, we were lucky to have some pretty great courses with the lab, but I don't know about favorite ones. Although one reference perhaps for kind of a direct influence was John Maida would teach a course each semester, and so a lot of the ideas that came up in those classes are things that had a direct influence on the kinds of things that we built. And like an initial thing being, he did this numeric photography course, which was basically each week get a prompt about a way of, so going out with these really, really terrible, first generation digital cameras and shooting images with them, and then basically write a Photoshop for yourself to like do something interesting with the image based on a prompt that he put out each semester, each week. And so we spent the semester doing that, and just that experience of like, oh, okay, how do I get image data out? How do I start playing with those color values? How do I do that in a way that's like sane and not, not making people kind of get into all this weird stuff about, the way that color data is stored and all that, and like just making that as accessible as possible. That had a big influence on it. So the photo class was one. There was courses in interaction. Processing came along a couple years later. John was teaching a course called Organic Form, and in that one he sort of wanted to teach several different languages. So first starting with design by numbers, and then he's like, all right, let's do Scheme. And so like I hacked Scheme into the design by numbers environment. And then he's like, all right, let's do Python. And so like I hacked Python into the design by numbers environment. And so that was also sort of, becoming like what processing would then become, because like, oh wait, we can just keep hacking different languages in here. This actually kind of works. And, playing with this experimental mode of, a version of DBM that could do larger, spaces and things. And so then in that class was in a position of basically needing to build the software that was that the students were all gonna have to use while also having to turn in my work each week. And so again, that sort of, hey, here's this sort of side project that we're doing along with the rest of it.
That's cool.
Actually, Ben, that reminds me of another really fundamental thing about the origins of processing, is that it has dual audiences. We really want to allow people who are very technical, people who are already really good coders, to be able to work with visual form and to be educated in visual form, as well as to teach coding to artists and designers. And I think that also came out of MIT in these Mass 110 classes that Ben mentions.
Yep.
You'd have computer science majors and architecture majors in the same class. And by the end of the semester, they had learned so much from each other. The architects would learn from the coders, and the coders would learn about visual form from the architects. And so processing we talk about the two cultures, like science and art, and it's really meant to be a space in between where nobody has an advantage. The artists don't have an advantage over the systems and the coding, and the coders don't have an advantage over the artist in thinking about visual space and ideas.
Very cool. Are there any projects that either of you are working on, or any of them together?
Nothing together at the moment, I don't think. Mostly just the processing 4 stuff.
Yeah, I mean, processing 4 has been going on for a long time, and it's getting really close. And also the new processing website, processing.org, just launched about a week ago. That's been over a year of work, like really hard work that Design Systems International basically completely donated to us, which I think is the biggest volunteer and labor that we've ever had, and it's such good work. I had all these Perl scripts that I like wrote in 2002 and 2003 that have been like moved over into modern web. And there was a team of like volunteers, like 12 people, who ported over all that content from like old formats and up-resed images. And I think Ben and my collaboration at the moment is like completely focused on the processing stuff. But we've done a couple things in the past. We did like a huge, like 72-foot by 8-foot mural together.
Wow.
That was all like printed out. We've done a series of like works on paper,
which is still up at MIT, so it's kind of fun. Like I was over on campus last week or so, and going past it, and so here it is, kind of looking out. So super fun to still see those things around.
Yeah.
It's great. Well, I know, Casey, are you working on a playground drop on Art Blocks? I think I saw something in the channel. Potentially, no?
I haven't talked to Jeff and Snowfro about it yet, but okay. I've been working on actually 3 different things at the same time. I don't know what's going to come first.
Okay. And then what about you, Ben? Are you potentially going to do a drop?
I probably should. The rest of my work has been, I run a studio. Like my supposed real job is running a studio in Boston, and we've been doing an enormous amount of COVID-related work, and so there's kind of no end to the how much needs to be done there. So I haven't had nearly as much sort of other time to like carve out, but hopefully soon.
Very cool. So processing has become so huge. Do you ever feel that it will be permanently be attached to you, as in Casey REAS and Ben Fry, of processing fame? And does that bother you, or is that something that you enjoy? Or I don't know, can you kind of like touch base on that?
For me, it's a hard one to talk about because I mean, just to kind of say it bluntly, Ben and I have been like stressing out, ruining our health, losing sleep for 20 years over this project. But also at the same time, there's so many other people who have contributed to this. And if you go to the processing site, look under the people, people have contributed years of work to processing that aren't Ben Fry and Casey REAS. And I really those people need to be recognized as well. And so I like to talk about that.
I think it's also so Casey and I, with having separate work that that we're doing, or different kinds of careers that we're pursuing, like in addition to this processing thing, there's also, so obviously there's, for me personally, there's part of me that just really enjoys building tools for other folks to use, because I get so excited about what folks make with them. And so to the degree that like this is something that folks have engaged on and, sort of, invested into and further, like there are moments at which it's like, well, maybe I should be just doing that full time, like it's like, so how do you, if that is something of larger impact, and, so what's the right amount of, time to be spending on it relative to these other sort of personal, selfish, whatever my other, pursuits that I'm wanting to do, because it just, even to give it that much more attention, especially given just sort of like what is that relationship to the community, and what's the right the right way to further engage and keep it moving along. And thankfully, we've had lots of, as Casey was mentioning, we've had lots of other people who are coming in and extending it in different ways, and it doesn't need to be just about kind of what Ben and Casey's processing is, or what the foundation is with the two of us, or even the two of us plus Dan. But it is an interesting, it's kind of out there, it kind of keeps calling us back in a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
In the early days, we were really focused on there was a processing community that was around this alpha forum that we built, and Ben and I kind of lived on that forum for a number of years, and there were a lot of people there sharing with each other, sharing code. Hey, how do I do this? Oh, have you tried this? It was really wonderful. But then everything spun out to the point where it grew and grew and grew. I have no clue how many people are using processing and where. And every time I travel, I don't know if I go to Tokyo or Moscow or Dubai, I mean, I meet people who are using processing, and we started the processing community day worldwide a number of years ago to really try and engage with people about it. And I think people have really owned processing in their own ways. There's a community day in Tokyo, community day in Brazil. They have so much energy and so much local community. I'll just say processing is not Casey Reaas and Ben Fry right now at all. I mean, we're keeping it warm and making it, but it's so beyond that.
Cool. Well, appreciate you sharing that. I actually just got a question from Tyler Hobbs. What steps can we take to help legitimize this art in the form and the? Sorry, I'll start again. What steps can we take to help legitimize this art form in the eyes of the traditional world, or is it even a worthwhile thing to worry about?
I've been trying to do that for 20 years. I had my first gallery show in New York in November 2001. I really cared about that for a long time. At this moment, I don't care at all. I want to build new things, and honestly, Art Blocks has given a lot of energy, and I think it's given, maybe I could say it's given me the courage to not care about validation from other art sources. I'm really excited about building something new, and doing that on our own terms in our own way, without a need to be concerned with what happened before. I mean, and I love art history. I look at it all the time. It's important for me in my work, but those are my thoughts about it at the moment.
I always feel
modest success. People just didn't understand really what I was doing, and I kind of to your point, Case, it just feels like we're on the verge of something new and a new level of acceptance and a new audience, and people that are more digitally native or internet, of the age of the internet, and they're just starting to understand what this artwork is and what it's about and appreciating it. And so I'm with you too. I've kind of eventually I'd like for all of this to find its way into the dialogue around general contemporary art. But at the moment, it feels we're just building something new, and it's a great vehicle for all the artists that are engaged in generative art right now. So.
Yeah, I just to tack on that really quick. I'm sorry. We were both we're in the auction at Sotheby's, and I think that was a thrill. That was really great to see all these different cultures collide in that. When I had my work up at the Whitney Museum and the Pompidou a number of years ago, that felt really good. And so there is that too. But I feel like we should carve our own path at the same time. And if that happens, it happens. Ben, you had some thoughts, I think.
No, I think that as far as worrying about concerns for what's legitimate or what's deemed legitimate or whatever, the folks who are concerned about that and who are will always move the goalpost, so regardless of what you do, they're always going to move it out further, right? So if you've had something in a big show, does that count? Does that mean, is that legitimate? Are you properly an artist? Whatever. It just that for the folks who care about that, it is more about sort of gating things and sort of keeping people out than it is sort of a positive moving things along. On the other hand, one of the or another way I think about it a lot is with John Maeda. One of the things that on his doing his PhD work at Tsukuba in Japan, his advisors are like, great, well, so this is this is nice, you're doing this computational stuff and whatever, and but you don't have any, there aren't other peers, right? So we can't compare your work to other people to say this work is this much better or this much worse, or you're not thinking about this or that or whatever. And I think the point here being the same within this community, you need to figure out what that is and what that looks like. And so how do you create works based and have them anchor off of one another, have them sort of understand, develop this sort of shared understanding of what is happening behind these works and how to talk about them. And and it's not so much I don't know, needing to further set up another sort of way of gatekeeping people out of that, but rather establishing that for yourselves, and other folks may or may not figure it out, or are going to come along with it. But I think there's so much work to be done. Maybe another way of putting it is just, I think there's so much work to be done within the community, even before you worry about everybody else, that if you kind of push all of that along and keep challenging each other and sort of doing more and more interesting work and developing that further, that's going to happen a lot more naturally, without having to worry about whatever these other clowns are into.
Yeah.
Like other creative fields like fashion design and painters can be toxic like, to each other. Really not a good environment for growth and for mental health. And in this world of computation of creative coding, it's been really supportive. Like over these 20 years, people really want to help other people and want to support other people. And I'm hoping we can retain that as long as we can.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super important. Well, I wanted to open it up to Jeff or Snowfro. I don't know if either of you had any questions that you wanted to ask Casey and Ben.
Probably. Well, I mean, I guess, man, okay, I don't want to take up all night.
Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I'm just curious. How much do you all individually work in? Like, would you ever write a script in P5.js, or you guys obviously like P5 is kind of an extension of it, and it's what allows us to do what we do. I'm just kind of curious. Like, processing is still more powerful. I know that, especially as you get into processing 4. But do y'all tinker in P5?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of going with the point of processing itself. It's we're less interested in sort of building here's the ultimate tool that you use for everything. And so it's like, yeah, so P5.js is great for the same sort of sketching out an idea, and I want to immediately put it on the web because I need other people to take a look at it, or respond to it, or I need to distribute it further, and or I need to prototype something that might be rebuilt as a native app or something like that. And so yeah, all those things still apply. And even I think that also applies even outside of just processing in general. Like, when I get excited about when folks sort of teach these platforms as more of a group, so there's like, yeah, there's open frameworks and there's Cinder and there's these other kinds of things, all the different environments for doing sort of more node-based programming is a whole different approach that works for a whole another set of people. It's really great for certain kinds of problems, and so yeah, I think it's just important to work with as many things as possible and just kind of get used to it, and or get used to the affordances of each. Like, it's kind of, I always think of like, we haven't stopped using pencils because we have pens. Like, you use a pen sometimes, you use a pencil sometimes. They have different sort of things they do well, and then and sometimes you don't use either and you type. So there's just different. Best to just think about that relative to different things that are available.
Another thing really, I think, wonderful about processing being so free is that there's a lot of other language ports too. There's Ruby processing has been great. There's a Clojure version. There's a Python version. I think Ben in particular is excited about a native Python version. Maybe that's processing 5. That's dangerous to say. I
I
shouldn't
know,
have said
don't
it.
say it. We're gonna
I know. I'm so sorry.
get us in trouble.
But yeah, I use P5 all the time. I think Ben and I both teach with P5. Actually, another thing is we're in the foundation together. We're meeting with P5 all the time. We've learned so much from Lauren Lee McCarthy, and now working with Chen Chen and Evelyn. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to be together with this. Yeah.
And I have a very quick second question. Ben, do you have an Ethereum address?
I don't yet. I should.
Oh, you should really work on getting one of those and send it to me. I somehow suckered Casey to send me one. I guess it was November. And yeah, I'd love to get yours as well.
I appreciate it.
Cool. Well, is there any other questions from Jeff or Snowfro?
I mean, I've been jumping in with mine along the way. So I think one thing I do want to comment on that I thought of when you guys were talking is there's sort of this like educational element around processing too that I think is really important. Both, I don't know, that it's both obviously using it to teach people basic coding and that sort of thing, but just, I don't know. It just feels like a very important part of, it's not just an artistic tool, it's also an educational tool. And so I don't know, it kind of came up in your guys' conversation. So I just want to touch on that too. It's like you guys both teach and use it to teach, you know what I mean? And so I think that's something to know. I was in higher education for a really long time. I didn't teach, I taught much, the stuff you were describing, Casey, about your Bauhaus, tenants and stuff. That's all the sort of stuff I taught. But yeah, I really like the idea of it being sort of this educational tool as well as it being an artistic tool.
I think, yeah. So that's a great point, in that it brings to mind kind of this idea of part of it is like you're going to be perpetually learning, right? So it's not there is no point at which you're like, okay, now I know how to code, and now like I've figured it out. I've learned the whole set of things. Like I read that book. And so I think having an approach that is built around the idea of curiosity and perpetually learning more inside of the environment that you're using is really important. And perhaps more, and being able to do that from that perspective, instead of it being something that's, okay, now you're going to use this toy teaching environment that you can kind of sit down and use and have sort of training wheels. And then later people are going to do real work with, these other kinds of tools. But I think it's really powerful if you can, sort of start from this perspective of, the things that you're creating are always going to be these sort of curiosity driven exercises, right? Where you're going to kind of go in and try and learn something. And whether that's, hey, I'm learning a new feature or learning a new, part of the language or learning a way of doing something algorithmically, or be able to build something and put it on a page. And then like, it's teaching you something back, like, oh, that, what happened there? Like, I didn't expect the form to do this thing. And then, kind of learning from that and then iterating on that further. And that there's just having that embedded in, and that having that be part of the approach, as opposed to kind of like, it's a classroom learning kind of exercise. Like can we get things more, can the education aspect be focused more on that sort of curiosity driven, finding your way through it versus, the eat your vegetables kind of learning that we often associate with education.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm really excited about the way processing has been used is it's often like a first programming language. It's like a gateway. Like I talk to so many people who like learned with processing and now they're using something else. And that's beautiful for us. We never, as Ben said earlier, we never made it to be like the thing. And so the syntax with processing is so similar to C, to intentionally for doing things on Arduino and with electronics, to Java, to C++, to JavaScript, to C#. So like if you're going into the web or you're going into game design and working in Unity or all these other things, like people use lots of different programming languages through their lives. And so the idea is like, let's learn the fundamentals. Let's learn about variables and loops and conditionals and arrays. And once you have that, like that's the hard part. You've learned how to think in a new way. And then you can port that to whatever language you need for a new project.
Not unlike a spoken language, like if you learn one, it's a lot easier to pick up your next one and the next one and next one.
Definitely. Well, we got one more question for you. How do you cope with operating systems changing? Is that something that is just incredibly challenging all the time?
Oh man, that's like a sword, like into the side, into the ribs.
All right. Well, we'll just we don't need to talk about it right now. We understand that it's a touchy subject.
I'm here. Let's see. So
What are you doing?
Sitting in my workspace here. So here's my Windows testing machine. Here's my M1 MacBook. I've got my Intel machine downstairs. It's haunting us.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to leave it on. Oh, go ahead, Casey.
No. I mean, processing 4, just to say, fixes a lot of stuff that Apple broke. That's kind of like one of the main reasons processing 4 exists. Like we just can't keep the code the same. I mean, this is for Ben to say. It always has to be like moving through the water like a shark in order to keep running as operating systems and hardware change.
Yeah.
The shark thing is a great way to put it. But yeah, like just Apple's moving in a direction of machines you don't mess with and you don't tinker with. And so it's very difficult for a project like ours as far as creating, being built around creating things that are new, and they want everything to be locked down and signed, and distribution is a problem because it might be a virus or whatever else. And so so that's that's a whole other philosophical thing.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I don't want to leave it on a sour note, but I would love for you to tell us, Processing Foundation, how can people get involved? Where can they go to, donate time or money?
Yeah, processingfoundation.org, and the P5JS website and the processing website. That stuff's all there. I mean, I do definitely want to say before we wrap this up that the community around art blocks has significantly changed things for the Processing Foundation. I think the generosity of the artists, providing a percentage of their drops to the foundation, it's not overstating it to say it's going to change our ability to perform our mission, to make coding accessible and to make top level software environments free for everybody to use. It's just extraordinary what you've built and what you've enabled, and your artist generosity toward us. I might tear up about that.
Well, Casey, Ben, I wanted to thank both of you for carving out some time on this Sunday to, help us celebrate 20 years of processing, but then also, just hearing about the history of processing, the ups and downs, and we're just super thankful to have you both on tonight.
Right. Thanks
so
much for having us.
So great, so fun. Thanks, Panyo. Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Eric.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
We get to have this conversation. Thank you guys so much. It means so much. And not just to us, but like to the rest of the people that are in this project, like the artists, the collectors. Like this wouldn't probably exist if it wasn't for processing. So thank you.
Yeah, you've changed the lives of so many people, and I mean, I don't want to speak on behalf of everyone, but I know a lot of people just thank you so much for creating this, putting in the time and effort, just to, not just you two, obviously, all the other people that have contributed. It's just been, it's been a huge undertaking. We appreciate you all being here this evening. Well, for the next segment, I wanted to jump into the love to see it highlights of the week, just highlighting some of the more positive things that we see in the community and just highlighting them for everyone here. So the first one is Druid nominates Kate on a truly wonderful gesture. For those who don't know, Kate, who is an Art Blocks collector, gifted Dimitri a ringer, not just any ringer, but a ringer that is one of Dimitri's favorites from the 1,000 outputs in that project. Kate commented on her gift to Dimitri by saying, "This project and this community of collectors have enriched my life. I'm thankful for the opportunity to give back, and thank you, Dimitri." Second one is from Crispy Boy, who would like to nominate username LeMay for a weekly highlight. Crispy Boy is new to Art Blocks, and they minted a prize, Eucaminopolis, and I guess LeMay just gave honest feedback, helped break down the features of their mint, and yeah, just an overall great community member and wanted to show some love. So thank you to LeMay. That was nominated by Crispy Boy. And the last one is from OX Houston, who is nominating the mods and Snowfro for doing a fantastic job in addressing and diffusing a couple agitated community members. Issues that with highly controversial subjects. OX Houston says that the threads were uncomfortable, but the team handled the very open discourse with respect and professionalism. So thank you, OX Houston, for that. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and move things right along to a highlight of the evening, which is the Squiggle giveaway.
I have a question for Casey and Ben while we wait. So a lot of the projects that are actually the only P5.js script that we're serving is version 1.0.0. It just felt right. It was right around the time that we started Art Blocks, and obviously we'll upgrade over time, but so far every project has just kind of successfully used that. How would you feel, given the permanence of the blockchain, if at some point, whether it's Art Blocks or Art Blocks and a bunch of artists or whatever got together? I mean, it would be a significant investment. But if P5.js were immortalized on the blockchain, so the same way that we're kind of creating Art Blocks scripts and they're getting immortalized on the blockchain, how would you feel about that? And yeah, I mean, obviously we can minify it. We can kind of make it as small as possible. But I'm just kind of curious.
I think the P5.js community really does things together. They never make decisions without consulting the community, having time for comments. And that's a beautiful way that they work. So it's completely not for Ben and I to have an opinion about that.
Cool. Well, we'll pitch it to the community, I guess.
I'm happy to facilitate it. Yeah, completely.
Cool.
All right, we got about 90 seconds left. So you'll need to answer all 4 questions correctly. All right, can you all hear me now? A lot of people are typing. I know we have about 10 seconds left. Okay, looks like we got the audio back. 2 seconds left. All right, we're closing up the entries. Looks like we got 118 people who got all 4 answers correct. Congratulations to those people. And now we will select a number. Let's create a little bit of suspense. Number 97. BT Mish. I'll go ahead and tag you. So BT Mish, congratulations. If you can go ahead and send,
BT Mish.
if you can send your wallet address to either myself or Snowfro, we'll go ahead and get this squiggle going.
Send that over. And for the multi-sig signers, get to your safe, please. Oh, are we there? BT Mish. Yes, congrats. Now send me your address.
All right, we'll go ahead and get this going.
You got it, Masood?
Nothing over here. Hold on.
Maybe I can send it. Mish.
All right, just hang tight, everyone. We'll go ahead and get this one going.
Just got an address from someone that's not BT Mish.
Oh.
Nice try, Zarko.
Well, while we get that going, I will let you know that for August 29th, which is next Sunday at our normal start time of 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, we're going to have Noah Davis on After Dinner Mints. He is the head of digital sales at Christie's Auction House, and Noah helped with the $69 million Beeple sale earlier this year. So I think that'll be a fun show for next week. Looks like we're waiting on the address from our Squiggle winner.
Okay, I got it, everybody.
Got it? Okay.
All right. Sending the transaction now. If you guys that are out there, could you please sign it and send it back to me, and I'll execute it. It should be in your inbox. To the folks that are sending me their addresses, nice try. All right, we got one down. Need one more. There we go. All right. Squiggle is inbound. Sorry for the extra time with the multi-sig, but I do think it's probably a better thing to do.
Looks like we had a hyper pipe coming in, probably. So,
is that what the bet is?
I feel like that's every week. We got a hyper pipe coming in.
All right, it's confirmed. Let's see what we got. Yeah, super excited to hear Noah talk. That's gonna be awesome. I got to keep up with him a lot on the CryptoPunks.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Just, head of digital sales at Christie's, and just, I think, a lot of insight as far as, NFTs and, traditional marketplaces will be interesting.
I wonder if Noah knows Jess. Did we ask her that? I can't remember.
I don't think so. I think I found out about Noah after we had Jess on.
All right, it's minted.
Oh, wow. It's a nice one.
Oh, man, that's beautiful. Congrats. Yay, another Squiggle. Slowly chipping our way to 10,000, everybody. Wow.
Well, thank you
All
for
right.
everyone who participated. Snowfro or Jeff, did either of you have any news or notes for the community?
It's late, so I'm not going to keep y'all any longer. But Jeff, I don't know if you got anything.
I'll make an announcement tomorrow, but we have Rich Lord coming to us on Friday for Curated. It's going to be an awesome project.
Yeah.
And I guess the other note is that I am serving as, I guess, the curator for the first exhibition happening in Marfa in October, and we've kind of got all the details together for that. So we're looking forward to sharing with everybody what's going to be up on the walls for all of you that are visiting. We're calling it Exhibition Zero Genesis. So it's our coming out party from an exhibition standpoint in Marfa. So looking forward to that.
Very cool. Well, I just want to thank all of our guests today. We had Ben Fry and Casey REAS for delighting us with your knowledge and insight and creating processing. Thank you so much. You've influenced so many people on Art Blocks and just around the world. So thank you so much for being here this evening. And I also wanted to thank Jeff Davis for being on, and also Snowfro. Thank you so much for being here this evening. And that's all I have for this for tonight. I want to make sure that everyone comment, like, subscribe to the Art Blocks YouTube channel. Be kind to each other, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks
Take
all.
care. Bye.